Relationships can be a source of great joy and support, but they can also bring challenges. Dr. Tipton is here to discuss toxic relationships and the role they can play in trauma. Now, Dr. Tipton, trauma can come in many forms. For example, toxic relationships with verbal abuse or physical abuse, and it can really impact someone. So how does prolonged exposure affect someone?
Well, prolonged exposure tends to change someone's sense of reality in what is a healthy versus unhealthy relationship. And what's interesting is a lot of times when people have been exposed to toxic relationships from an earlier age, like family relationships, someone living with an alcoholic parent, or somebody suffering from other mental illness, they tend to not understand what then is a healthy relationship. And so they ultimately repeat that and get into other ones. And over time, that becomes what's familiar to them. And so people around them will say things like, hey, look, I don't think they're treating you that well. And they can't see it because it's all they've ever known. It's the dance that they know. It's the steps that they know. They really cannot come out of that. But it then impacts the way that they feel emotionally, physically, mentally, and people ultimately have to cope in some way with prolonged stress and exposure. So they'll often find unhealthy ways to do that. And you'll see this in substance use, in working behaviors, to ultimately just moving from one relationship to another, but them still having the same underlying toxic behaviors.
Excellent. Thank you for answering a very tough question for us, Dr. Tipton, and thank you for being here. If you or a loved one need help coping with trauma, you can visit Caron.org.